quite a few things, just not only just what was going on with the website, but some other issues associated with policy and sort of what ifs associated with a program like this. And staff's been very responsive. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be a really good asset for the community, but I'm also really pleased with how both the IT department and the mayor's office have embraced this and really is trying to make it work well. And I think the overall structure of how they have put together this pilot program is sound enough. In reading the policies, I read the policies that you gave to me, and they're very simple and straightforward and allows for a lot of flexibility for the program. And I think it's just going to be a really good thing for us to have. So I'm excited to see what kind of participation we get at these informational meetings in the next couple days.
Right. I would just add that this is the first phase of the pilot program. As we roll this out, we'll be coming back to you in the coming months to update you on the demand for the service, as well as to talk more about the next phase, which is the training program and how that takes shape. And just wanted to thank Marty Mulholland and Dale Neitzel and IT for a lot of the work that they've put in on this. Wouldn't have been possible to get this far without them.
Gene,
have we received anything yet?
No.
Any inquiries? Or
yeah, we received a number of inquiries. I know Vanessa has fielded some of those. Marty has as well. I have. I know that there's definitely interest out there, but we won't officially even be ready really to accept those videos until Monday the 15th, starting at 9 a.m.
Okay.
Pinky?
Brian, could you give a little overview of what the training is and the dates and times for people?
Well, I would like to. We're not that far in terms of dates and timing on the second phase. We're really focused on getting this first phase implemented, which is, again, accepting those videos and doing the informational sessions. The training that we contemplate will be through an RFI or RFP process for a local contractor to provide training to those interested in maybe it's post-production or how to create a video, how to tell a story, things of that nature. We do also anticipate having some equipment checkout availability, so maybe a video kit or something that someone could check out from the city or the contractor that we go with to provide the training, who could then check out that equipment for people to create their own videos. So we're focused on the first phase right now, and I'll be working with Vanessa in the coming weeks on really developing that RFI and understanding the direction we'll take the training program. But I think our hope is to do that over the next couple of months and be ready in early 2015 to start that training program.
Yeah. So tomorrow is an informational session.
That's right.
It's not a training. Okay,
That's
so
right.
I misunderstood. So thank you for clarifying that,
Sure.
that it's an informational session. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So along those lines, there are 2 info sessions. First one is tomorrow night at 7 at the library.
Yes.
And when's the second one?
Wednesday at 1 p.m. in the library.
Wednesday at 1 at the library. And then we start taking submissions on Monday, September 15th at 9 a.m.
Yes.
And tentatively, okay, and Sunday, October something at 6 p.m. we begin airing.
October 5th.
5th. October 5th. Okay. Anything else regarding this item? Okay. Thank you very much. Great update. Moving on, we have another information-only item about energy initiatives, the Georgetown University Energy Prize. In February 2014, Mayor Linville submitted a letter of intent indicating the city's participation in the Georgetown University Energy Prize competition. In August of 2014, the city was notified that it has advanced to the quarterfinals. The competition will culminate in one city being selected to receive a $5 million prize to be used to further energy-related activities in the community. Staff will brief council on partnerships and activities necessary to advance in the competition, as well as related city efforts to update the 2007 Climate Action Plan. And I have Mark Gardner and Claire Fogelsong here as staff to present. So, Mark?
Good afternoon, Council. Mark Gardner, Legislative Policy Analyst for the City Council. I'm here to provide an overview on the Georgetown University Energy Prize for you and allow you to provide some general feedback to staff regarding this prize and the efforts behind it. I know you're aware of this prize, that we're involved in it, and you've had some very short discussions in your various sessions about this before, but this will be the first opportunity for the whole council to have a general discussion about this topic, so welcome all feedback from you on this. And Claire will talk about another energy-related item that's going to be happening simultaneously with the writing of the plan for this project. So just to go over some of the general points about this prize, first of all, it's a nationwide contest for cities with a population of between 5,000 and 250,000, and the originators of the prize say that they think there's a lot of innovation in small to medium-sized cities, and so that's why they've targeted it this way. And there's two general components about how you compete for this prize. The first is kind of a nuts and bolts. Have you reduced energy use in municipal facilities, school district facilities, and residential housing over the 2015-2016 period? So that will be measured with actual data. And they also want to see a comprehensive plan with replicable elements that can be used as a template nationwide for other similar cities to do energy innovation, particularly with regard to conservation. The winning city will receive a $5 million prize to be used for energy-related investments. There's some guidelines about what you can do with that, but we'll worry about that when we get a little farther down the road here. And Georgetown University is making technical resources available to participating cities. They're working in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Energy to provide all kinds of webinars and information to participating cities. I've already participated in a few of those. They'll be having events. They'll help publicize the efforts of various cities. They'll be tracking progress of the prize on their own website, including a performance dashboard. And they'll also help identify opportunities for grants, which I will certainly be paying attention to along with other staff working on this project. In terms of our local process, there was a letter of intent from the mayor sent to Georgetown in February 2014. That started that started the process. The City Council's own energy working group has provided feedback and guidance to the project, particularly in the early phases here. And staff leads for the project are shared between our council office and Public Works. And we've also been very lucky to have an intern from Western's relatively new Institute for Energy Studies. They've supplied a paid intern for the project who's dedicated specifically for working on energy-related and energy conservation issues. That's a tremendous benefit to this project. And as you've probably already heard, we've submitted the application June 2014, but we have been accepted as a quarterfinalist. We heard in August 2014 there, otherwise known as last month. And the next phase will be the writing and submission of a comprehensive energy savings plan, which is due November 10th, 2014. So that's going to be the fun part. This project and the effort to get the prize is comprising a broad community partnership, including these 7 organizations. We'll likely be adding a few more. I'd like to get an energy-related business on the leadership team. We're going to be talking to affordable housing providers because that's an important component of residential conservation. And what will occur with this writing of this plan and also the implementation of this effort to get the prize is that we will be bringing all of our efforts currently underway and work together to create synergies and leverage to greatly sort of update and intensify our effectiveness regarding energy. So this can only work if we have a broad coalition of groups, and we'll also be reaching out to the broader citizenry as well. We've formed working groups to put together the plan that are organized around the 4 different components of required energy reduction for the plan, including municipal facilities, the school district, and residential housing. And we've also formed a 4th working group that's focusing on community engagement and outreach. Next steps include a review of existing programs, and also facilities upgrades to look for both opportunities that these certainly provide us, and also look for areas where we can probably improve our use of existing programs and facilities. We'll have to set some general reduction goals for the 2015-16 period. Public works staff are helping to put together background information along with our council intern to have a very focused survey that will be ready to go out probably in October. And the intent behind that is to really try to broadcast that widely, so we'll get people who are kind of past the early adopters but are more generally interested but not yet involved population. So that's the hope there, and to get specific feedback about what they might do to improve their own energy performance in their house, and what can we do to help them. We expect to bring a resolution back to you all in October that would allow you to look at the draft plan and hopefully support it if you think it's a good plan. And there'll be activities and outreach to the broader populace, including a possible energy fair for Bellingham residents, a web page which we expect to start work on very soon, and neighborhood events and involvement. Just to give you a broader sense of the universe here, there's 52 total cities, 4 in Washington, and there's a number of cities for whom energy is very important, and they've compiled a very impressive record in the recent past. So we've got some stiff competition here. Fort Collins, Palo Alto, they're often in energy-related news in terms of innovation. So we're not dealing with the slackers here. So that's good. And we think, however, that we're a strong contender. There's a legacy of success and cooperation around energy issues in our community. We can build off existing projects and programs, including the Energy Challenge for residential conservation. We've got a lot of upgrades in place, but we think we can possibly optimize the performance of those. Given all these groups working together and the expertise there, we think there's going to be a lot of synergies between what the different groups are doing, and when they're working together, we're going to create some real momentum there. There's also going to be, as previously mentioned, an update of the city's own greenhouse gas reduction plan, which should help bring the expertise from that area into this plan as well. And as you know, there's various facilities we've already invested in, but there's a few more that are still coming online, which should help us in this process. For example, in the city of Bellingham, the water treatment plant, the dissolved air flotation filtration systems should actually reduce the amount of energy, at least that's theoretically the case according to the engineers, because there'll be less need to constantly refilter the water. And there's already some conversions planned to LED on Alabama. There's efforts to broaden that conversion as well to other city streets. Bellingham School District has bonds and grants for energy upgrades, and they're going to be remodeling some schools and rebuilding others. And we've only got 51 other cities to beat, so that should be no problem. Given that, however, being realistic, I think our immediate goal is to try to get into the next phase, which is to get into the top 10. And so if we're there, then we're in contention for the overall prize. But nevertheless, I want to leave you with this image for meditation purposes, courtesy of Sustainable Connections. So that's my presentation, and if it's okay with council, I'll go ahead and let this segue right over to Claire for his presentation, and then you can ask questions as you will about both of these projects and provide any guidance you might have for us.
Claire Fogelfong, Public Works. I think it's an overstatement to consider these words in a presentation. I'm just going to give you a brief update. We had been planning on revising the greenhouse gas, the climate plan that we had in 2007 and that we did some work on in 2010, 2011. We've been planning on revising that this fall, and we'll continue to do that. We're looking at incorporating some of the work that Mark and the other staff are going to do on the greenhouse, on the Georgetown Prize project into this plan if it seems like that's appropriate as we go through it. What we'll do is go through this section by section and look at what we've accomplished and what still needs to be done, look at what we can add to the plan. There are 3 sections, and we'll be looking at mostly at sections 2 and 3, which are what we're doing now and what we can do to adapt to climate change if that should occur. So there are, in this plan, there's municipal and community actions that have been undertaken already and that are still proposed, and we'll be looking at what kind of what kind of benefit we can get to reduce greenhouse gases through these actions. So very simple, in coordination with this Georgetown Energy Prize, but on a separate track. This is the Georgetown Energy Prize is reducing overall consumption of energy. We're just trying to reduce the greenhouse gases, whether that's reducing the electricity consumption or not. It might be from a different source if that's clear to folks. So, any questions for Mark?
Gene and then Michael.
When do they whittle the next group down to 10?
Well, there's actually an intermediate process, and that is we have to submit this plan on November 10th, and they will have to bless its comprehensiveness and robustness, but we are assuming that if we do a decent job, we will get through that, and then they will, what they will do is probably select the top 10 energy reduction performers at the end of the 2015-16 period, and then the judgment is in part on your energy reduction performance, but also in the comprehensiveness and robustness and the sustainability of your plan. For example, if your reduction is only due to one-off luck items, you probably won't get as much credit as if you did, 7 or 8 things, all of which have been shown to be effective and that will continue to reduce energy. So they're recalibrating the prize a little bit as they go, but that's my understanding of how it's going to work.
Michael and then Jack.
I'm very excited and very supportive of us being involved in this. I'm sure we can make the top 10, but I think even if we don't win the prize, I think it's worth doing. But along the same lines, I know that Councilmember Vargas and I have been in support of the idea of reinstituting a resource conservation manager position here at the City of Bellingham. We've had one in the past. They were let go for various reasons during the downturn. The school district actually has 2 people who share their resource conservation manager position. And I guess I'd like to get some preliminary feedback from members of the administration as to how they're looking at the idea of a resource conservation manager for Bellingham, because the resource conservation manager's job really is to manage an institution's own facilities, to look for energy savings in programming, not just in putting in new boilers, for example, but in actually how you actively manage buildings. And this position, which seemed to me would be a very natural staff person to lead the effort over the next 2 years. Right now we're making do with existing staff members, but I think in the future we're going to want it not just for this prize, but for general municipal operations. So can I get a preliminary read on that? And because I would like the resource conservation manager like this month, and I know that can't happen, but I'd hate to see us commit to the idea maybe, but only have them come on board and be active halfway through the Georgetown Prize, and just have those benefits come in later, so we are on the top 10 rather than number 1. So Ted, please.
Well, I was going to offer that I'll let Ted speak to this more in more detail, but I think, when it comes to these types of requests, the administration, what the mayor's looked at is not looking at these types of positions in isolation. So it's understanding the needs of the entire organization and how something like that fits in with what we want to achieve. And I think, I know one of the conversations we've had is that maybe a year ago we talked about an analysis we did on all of our facilities, and it was recommending that we invest $5 million annually on facility maintenance and things of that nature. And so we're trying to weigh things like that sort of demand against a position to pursue a one-off prize. And it's a challenge to understand where to direct those resources. And so if Ted has more to offer to that, I'd certainly welcome that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think it's something that we'll be considering through the budget process, and I'm sure we'll get more input from council during that time. What we're doing right now is looking at our existing resources. I've been working with Public Works staff trying to identify any capacity that we may have right now with existing staff to dedicate more time towards not just the Georgetown Prize, but generally energy conservation projects, things like Claire was speaking of in terms of climate action plan, kind of focusing more on those with staff if possible. As we go through the budget, we're looking very closely at all of our staff resources and all of our needs, and facilities is very stressed, as you can imagine, in terms of the facilities fund and that balance between if we're going to add more staff into the facilities fund, which is really spread across all of the city departments, so it does have a significant impact on the general fund. How do we want to do that? Do we want to rededicate existing staff maybe to new priorities, or maybe reinvigorate previous priorities versus adding new staff? So it's a continued discussion. I will say in the departmental budget that was presented to the mayor, in an effort to balance all of the public works funds, I could not present any new staff in facilities. We'll continue to have the discussion and see where that goes. But what we are doing is across all of public works, and primarily that lands in the natural resources group, can we dedicate existing staff towards these efforts? So that's where we're at. I'm sure we'll have more discussion during the budget process with council and with the mayor. But that, as of the department budget being submitted to the mayor at the end of August, that's where we're at.
Well, two clarifications. I also don't view the RCM position as a one-off thing, but as a perpetual position. Many institutions, like the school district, they already have those duties assigned to a full-time staff member. And also, I would say that it is a short-term upfront cost, but the whole justification behind an RCM position is that there are operational savings that pay dividends annually. So
yeah,
it is a challenge up front, but the point is it should be a savings later on.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point, and it's well taken. And I think in conversations with Ron and others over at the school district, I think we're trying to implement an approach similar to what they're doing, which is they do have two staff that work on resource conservation efforts, but they're existing staff that wear other hats as well. And I think that's the approach that we're trying to look at right now. We have folks within the department that work on conservation-related efforts, education and outreach, as well as people within facilities that are trying to optimize our system. So I think it's a balance. I think we're definitely in agreement with you. This is it's a worthy effort, regardless of the prize. It's something that is in line with the council's goals and the council's policies and the mayor's policies and goals. And so we're trying to work within our existing staff, but we'll continue to look at that. And as I said, I'm sure there'll be more discussion throughout the budget process.
Jack and then Pinky.
So back to the prize itself, Mark, how much time do you see ballpark taking to get to this November 10th deadline?
That's a question I was hoping nobody would ask, but I am guessing it could take anywhere from a half to two-thirds of my time, simply because of the array of organizations and the multiple components and the review of all even with an intern and working closely with Public Works. And I'll be working closely with Anitra Atsaturo of Public Works in terms of writing the plan, and we will have these set of working groups. But at least for a couple of months, it really is going to probably gobble up a lot of time. I wish I could say it was a little bit less than that, but and after November 10th, of course, it will be in, and then I can catch up. But I'm not intending to drop all other projects, but I'm guessing it will be quite time-consuming to do a comprehensive plan, some of which will necessarily be speculative in terms of talking about what we think we will look into doing versus what we know we can do, but that's just the nature of a short-term turnaround like this.
So as a follow-up then, I'm just looking at the transferability of the work product that you produce for this cutoff date. How is it going to be a list of internal recommendations of what we can do to save energy, and then can that then, that work that you're doing, we can go and then transfer that into our budget or our other things that we want to go and maybe try and pursue grants or other fundraising activities, or we bite the bullet and just invest because we know that we're going to have the energy savings on the other end?
It really should produce kind of a blueprint or a template somewhat similar to, let's say, the bike or pedestrian plan, where there's a series of things, not all of which you might necessarily get to, but hoping to have a matrix and a narrative around that matrix that looks at what are we doing now, what do these different organizations, including the city, expect to do over the next 2 years, what things are currently being looked at, what things might be worth looking into, we're not sure we can do them, what things might be doable if there was external funding or grant sources. So it should be kind of a planning document. There's no legal force in this document, so we won't be required to do any specific thing, but I think if we do a good job, we should have a good template for bringing together a lot of these energy-related activities and creating some continuity there. So hopefully it should be a document that's useful to others without much translation, really.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Pinky?
I had a couple comments. First of all, I want to say how excited I am for this day. The first time I was told about the Georgetown Prize was in October of last year, and we've come a long way to make this happen, and really want to thank you, Mark, and also Anitra and Ted for the use of his staff and supporting this project, because we couldn't do that without you. Thank you very much for that. Also wanted to throw on my energy hat for just a moment and comment on the fact that an RCM is actually a trained person who understands building optimization, which we can put in as many facilities as we want and upgrade everything, but if nobody knows how to use it, we lose that money. So an RCM, yes, the catalyst is the Georgetown Energy Prize, but I do think that it is something that is a leadership and something that we should take the initiative in regards to a city and is having an RCM. So that's just my thoughts on that. And also, I just wanted to say that I think it is really possible for us to be one of those top 10, and I'm pretty excited about that process, and I probably wouldn't have got behind it if I didn't believe that. But what it really is going to take, and we're really lucky in Bellingham because we have a great foundation with our partners in regards to the organizations that are excited about this, and our partners on there. We have quite a few so far, and really everyone wants to see us achieve this goal. So from myself on the City Council, you have my full support in any way that I can, because I want to see that on the front page in December of 2016. So thank you very much for your work and your efforts on this.
Roxanne.
Well, I just really wanted to thank Councilmember Vargas for her leadership in bringing this competition to our city's attention to begin with. We've gotten so far with all of the work, and I really hope that we're going to be number one. But let's say that we aren't. This will make us more competitive for future competitions. And so hopefully, even if not this year, maybe in a future year, we will be number one. So thank you, Councilmember Vargas.
Anyone else? I was out for 1 second. Mark, I had said this was an information-only item, but it actually says provide direction. So was there anything needed from staff?
I think just general direction. Do you think this makes sense? What we've outlined does look like we're heading in the right direction, because this is the first time the whole keep rowing, I guess is what I'm seeing symbolically. So we'll keep rolling.
Yes, please.
Rolling,
yes. Good job. Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, our third item this afternoon, Army Street Project informational briefing. This one is indeed information only. This briefing provides an update on in-progress market research undertaken as part of the due diligence work defined in the Army Street Property Owners Memorandum of Agreement and subsequent agreements between the city and the Bellingham Public Development Authority. This briefing will focus on preliminary market research findings and their effect on the September 2013 Concept Development Plan, prepared prior to execution of the Property Owners Memorandum of Agreement. Finalization of the market analysis report and completion of the balance of due diligence work with the determination of development feasibility is targeted for the end of September. And I'll turn it over to Jim Long, Executive Director of the PDA. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a presentation that'll take about 10 or 15 minutes. Want to leave time for questions? Does that work?
That's great.
Okay. Thanks. We're here today to talk about the market analysis that is coming forward. This work has been going on since January. If you remember, I was here in July, and we talked about the physical parts of it, the survey work, the environmental assessment, the geotechnical considerations, and then those were good. And now we're moving into the more subjective and difficult parts. This work will culminate here in the next couple of weeks. But if you'll indulge me, I wanted to first tell you that we'll be coming back to you on September 22nd with everything put together and our recommendation. This is work in progress, and the mayor asked us to come in and talk about the key findings from the market analysis and their effect on that original concept development plan that you may remember. I brought some exhibits for it that was done at the start of the process. So I thought it might help to talk a bit about the... Oh, great. Can that be expanded? Oh, this one here? Doesn't help much, does it? You know, get it to where you can't read it. Okay, the idea behind this is just wanted to talk a bit about the purpose of this due diligence work. It involves a lot of different parties. It's aimed primarily at the property owners because they are the star players in this strategy. The work itself was defined in the original Property Owners Memorandum of Agreement that was effective in January, and that work focuses on determining the feasibility of the land assembly to accommodate a placemaking mixed-use development at this location, which has a lot of potential as a high-value location, but to realize that would take the assembly of multiple properties that are all small and their development being constrained if they were to try to do something on their own. It includes our property. So the purpose here was to focus on a placemaking mixed-use project and focus on the land assembly necessary to get to that if the project made sense. So we're here and charged with determining the feasibility of what project could be accommodated on that site, considering all the factors that influence the development of a project, and make a go, no-go recommendation to you by the end of September as to whether or not it seems feasible to continue with continued work. So the starting point for this was the concept development plan, which was done last fall. That was spelled out in the letter of intent. It was a starting point in discussions with the property owners. The purpose of that concept plan was to guide negotiation of that memorandum of agreement, which was far more detailed. The due diligence work, we're looking to determine the plausible development program supported by prevailing and projected market conditions that could work on that property. The key number 3 here is to assess the potential for the increase in property owner values, because after all, we're looking for them to voluntarily subordinate their property interest into an ownership position for the assembled property. And therefore, they would be reasonable to expect an increase in their property with the development and with the assembly. And that's why we have to look at the feasibility of the development itself that could happen on the property work backwards to determine an increase or a property value supported by that project, and that increase would have to be acceptable to the property owners themselves to take that next step. The work itself would define the interest of each property owner in what's defined as the business entity in the memorandum of agreement that would actually effect the consolidation and govern the different interests of the property owners in that consolidated property. And that's based on their existing current value of the property that would be included. The information derived from this would also determine a supportable price for the assembled property and presenting it to developers and provide a great deal of objective information to support that marketing. So all of this information serves basically these purposes. And the process of getting here, just to refresh your memory, this is hard to read and I'm sorry for that, but it points out that the beginning was the letter of intent in June of 2013. That led to the concept development plan, which I'll refresh your memory on. That in turn led to the memorandum of agreement in January. And the memorandum of agreement defined the due diligence work that is comprised of these elements in this box on the right. It's basically the survey and title research to determine encumbrances that might be barriers to entry. The Phase 1 environmental site assessment to see what's the condition of the property as far as remediation, if there is going to be any required. Third, what is the geotechnical characteristics underneath it? Where is that Seahome coal mine? You know, things like that. Minor details that could have killed this thing early. Appraisals and valuations, a key part, to determine the current value under prevailing market conditions of each property independently and separately. And then that looks at what that property could be worth under today's values and conditions if it was assembled, to see a progress checkpoint along the way, pre-development. And then looking at what would that aggregated value is a key consideration to the property owners. Now we're at the part marked red, which is the market analysis that takes that market research and screens our original assumptions in that concept plan for feasibility, and then with the data generated from the basic economic research starts to develop parameters and revisions to that plan to make it fit better with what the market might support. That all rolls into a revision of the development program that was anticipated in the MOA and the MOUs. And we are charged with coming back with that determination of feasibility from the perspective of the property owner and the potential developer. And the MOU in June of 2014 requires that each property owner provide us and you with what's defined as a statement of approval. They have the right to agree with or disagree with our assessment and each step of the assessment as well as the overall project. And at that point, that determination of feasibility becomes final. So we're busy because we're pulling all of this together now. The concept plan we started with, which guided the preparation of the MOA, we call it the ideal development scenario. It's done without research. But we primarily wanted to test what would be the maximum that property could physically support, given its size and the configuration of the property, and applying the Old Town sub-area plan overlay criteria to it. And so it illustrates the maximum that could happen on that site, subject to all the due diligence work, and it illustrates a consensus among the property owners in terms of the uses that they would like to see on the assembled property. So that started us off, and if you'll recall, we had a 2.3 acre site. At that point, there were 7 property owners that had volunteered to sign on. They were signatories to the MOA. That created the 2.3 acre site. The land uses that we started off with included a hotel and conference center. The PDA's thinking on that being that that would be a great catalytic use with economic development benefits for downtown, Old Town, and the waterfront. And an interesting possibility to anchor this placemaking project. We figured residential component would be important. That could be swapped out for office component. That particular plan showed residential. And then a retail commercial service element for a total of about 330,000 square feet of buildings. That's an FAR of about 3.3. FAR is the square footage of all of the buildings divided by the square footage of the site. That's a fairly dense project. The Old Town Sub-Area Plan provides a maximum FAR of 3.5, so we were pretty close to that. You could increase that FAR if you applied for density bonuses, which that plan didn't reflect, but we don't think we need. A key component of that going-in plan was to maximize the number of parking spaces that could be provided, knowing that we had to build a structure to fill that hole. The site's about 30, 40 feet below Holly Street. Our concept was that the parking structure would provide a building pad at grade with Holly Street. The multiple buildings would be built on top of that. And given that site size, it looked like we could build physically 800 parking spaces. That's a pretty significant structure. It's a subterranean structure and expensive. That would more than meet the needs of the project and create excess spaces that could be owned and used proprietarily by the public. So that was our September concept plan. And if you recall, it looked something like this. Building heights declined going south to north from 130 feet on the south side here. A 200-room hotel conference center there, that's an 11-story structure at 130 feet. It declines as you go northward to Central, where the building height is 35 feet. And this is a conceptual building program showing how plazas could work in there and achieve that 330,000 square feet with something to start pricing. The cross-section of the site shows how the 4 levels of parking fill the hole. The existing grade of Holly Street kind of follows a dotted line, difficult to see there, but you can see how that provides this deck. It also provides for a connection across the tracks to connect downtown with the waterfront, which was an important going-in consideration agreed to by all the property owners. So there was a draft of the market analysis attached to the package, and I do want to point out that was the first draft. It's pretty rough. It's been revised, edited twice. Not big changes in the message, but we're smoothing out numbers. We're taking these numbers, converting them into financial models to assess the financial feasibility of the project from the developer's point of view, again, to work that back into what the property owner's values might be post-assembly. That'll be the work for this week. What we've learned right off was that if we use the site to its full utilization, that you could build that 130,000 square feet, given the size, the features, and the allowable development criteria. That exceeds the capacity of the market to support a project of that magnitude. Okay, so we didn't go to a lot of trouble to price out the construction and development cost for that scenario, because early on in that analysis, and it's an interesting part of the research, focusing on the hotel and conference use, that's at least 5 years from today that you could build because of the oversupply of rooms that we're experiencing here. It's about a doubling of the room inventory in Bellingham, which is going to have an impact on the feasibility of a new and expensive construction project until that capacity is absorbed by the market. So that was telling us it's 5 years, not to say that it's not feasible, but it's not feasible for a while. And one thing to keep in mind is that we have to target uses that are feasible in a 2 to 3 year time period. That's the term of this memorandum of agreement that binds the property owners together. So you get much beyond that, it becomes a little academic. So the bottom line is the hotel and conference center was deemed infeasible primarily because it didn't meet the time constraints. We do see an existing and projected strong demand for downtown high-end apartments. And that's no news to anybody. You're seeing quite a surge, and there seems to be a good supply of pent-up demand for that. An interesting piece of this that really brought a lot of focus on our part was that there is a component of demand for Class A office space downtown that's unfulfilled. And what demand there is accommodated. There's some precedent for Class A office space at the highest level of the market, and that's being met in Barclay Village and Bellwether. So there's a pioneering aspect to a Class A office project, but it's not something that you would reject out of hand. The benefits of doing that, we think, make a project with an office component a priority because it would have economic development benefits, and it would help recruit and retain downtown employment, which would anchor continued efforts for increased business activity downtown. So there is a supply issue there that we see as a market opportunity. Retail is weak, somewhat oversupplied, but a component included in the project makes sense because it would be served and supported by the project itself and the area immediately around it. So there is a retail component there. Bottom line, there's good potential for the early commencement of a project that includes those uses there. And the other aspect of what started must be finished, so the duration of the project is important. It has to have a reasonable completion time to be absorbed into the market and become stabilized and demonstrate financial results. Our criteria call for that within a 5 to 10 year period, and these uses had the potential of achieving that. A red flag is the impact of the parking. By definition, the Class A project will have to have adequate on-site parking. And operating at the high end of the market, you have to meet lender, investor, and tenant expectations that require that parking. There's a physical aspect to it also in that the parking structure has to provide the deck to build on. Otherwise, it's way too far below street grade and inaccessible. So you have to deal with a parking structure. The results of this research show that that's going to be a problem because it's very expensive. But the capacity of the structure would need to be limited to just what the project requires. So unfortunately, there would not be a significant excess capacity. We also know that the current parking rates are low, the construction costs are high, and those costs will put stress on the rental rates required to justify the expenditure. So what we have to do now is balance achievable rates with reasonable cost. So those are basically, in a nutshell, what comes from that report. There's quite a bit of data there that's very objective and very useful. This is just to show you where we're going with this. I'll be coming to you with a feasibility evaluation and assessment report is what we call it. There's 60 evaluation criteria that we are using to screen the assessment of feasibility. They're a combination of objective and subjective. A scoring system here, pretty simple for each of these criteria. We're using arrows that point up. That's a good thing. It's a real good thing if it's pointing up in green. It's pointing down in red. That's not good. Yellow is something to flag if you were going forward and considered manageable, but something to deal with. What this sheet just shows is the assessments to date for these criteria. The report will also provide an appendix that shows the distillation and the interpretation of the data and the information available from this due diligence work that supports each one of these assessments. And we are down here working on other parts of it. Horizontal and clear, just to show that that work will have to be pulled together this week. And it culminates in the return of and return on capital investment for the MOA parties for this category, which is the economic analysis and market feasibility. This work has been done by a team of consultants, Leland Consulting Group out of Portland. Some familiarity with Bellingham. They worked on the marketplace deal way back. A specialist in hotels and conference centers, partnership hospitality services, and we had an architectural cost consultant to take these plans, although they're very conceptual, translate those into the cost part of the equation. The market research shows the income part. The pro formers are going to show the financial performance. All important. Now, the memorandum of agreement obligates us to pull this together, come to you with what's it all mean, in our opinion, by the end of September. And the steps from where we were and where we are, I just picked it up on August 29th. The property owners have been involved in this all along the way. We meet monthly. There's quite a bit of give and take as the information is generated and delivered to them, and then it's refined, put into a final form. Our last meeting was the 29th. The purpose of that was to get their comments on a draft of the market analysis and their comments on the appraisal work. We have a board meeting on the 17th, which is next week, which will allow our board to consider the feasibility evaluation and assessment report. I'd like to have their sign in before I come back to you, and that's the only meeting we'll have to do that. That's Wednesday week. There'll be a recommendation about the feasibility, and they need to approve that. Then I come to you with that in hand, with the copy of the report itself before the meeting, so you can review it for your 22nd meeting. I've asked the property owners to be prepared to come to the next and last property owners meeting on the 26th. We usually meet the last Friday of the month. Prepared to execute that statement of approval that's required. So they'll have some time to see the report, see the PDA's recommendation, react to that. I hope to have that in hand when I come back to you. If I don't, I'll deliver them as quick as I can. But that comes, they all know that that's the last step. They appreciate the opportunity to really have the final say. And that's the non-city property owners. So that's the 4 private property owners and us, PDA. So that concludes my briefing, and appreciate the attention.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions from council members? Pinky. And then, Michael?
Well, I just want to make sure that I understood. By the way, the market analysis was my favorite part of the packet. It really was. I think that people who are just interested in economic development for Bellingham can benefit from reading it, because it does some economic analysis on downtown and office space, on commercial development, on population growth, much of which aligns with what I've heard from other sectors. But I mean, I think it's a useful report for the council, for just anybody in economic development, regardless of any particular project. So I would say that. Tell me if I read the report correctly. I read the report as saying there are some definite positive signs, but with some limits. That there's a clear opportunity, especially for urban residential development, especially if it's mid-rise in height, so that you can avoid costly construction techniques, basically minimize the amount of steel you have to use.
Correct.
Because there's a pent-up demand, and the demographics for Bellingham are favorable and improving. So that was, I think, the most positive light. Also, there's a clear opportunity for Class A office, which there's none downtown. And I've heard grumblings about the lack of Class A office downtown for quite some time. So there's clearly a need. What I read there is the barrier is, the hurdle is financing. That for financing, usually people want some tenants in hand. And if you could get the tenants in hand, then that removes the barrier to that component of the project. Right. As you said, retail is a minimal component along Holly Street. It's not driving the project. It never will. And then also, it seems to me there's still a strong case for a convention and hotel facilities downtown, but the moment for that has passed. because we've had numerous new hotels come online, there's now a relative excess in hotel rooms. In my mind, they're sort of in the wrong place for economic benefit. They're by the highway, they're great for travelers. If they were downtown, that were other businesses are located, there would be kind of some synergy, but that moment is past, it seems. Is that an accurate summary?
Up until the hotel and conference center, we spent a lot of time on that, and this partnership hospitality services, in my experience of working with people in that end of the business, having done a few of these things, they were top flight, and challenged them and pushed them really hard on that, because we didn't want to be picking low-lying fruit, so to speak. You know, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, and we're very conscious of not doing something the private sector could do on another property. What we'd like to get is 2 or 3 projects going on at the same time. The story of this project is that we wanted a hotel and conference center that served a hybrid use. The most successful ones do that. There's a combination of transient business, which is the 1-night, 2-night stays, perhaps a vacation visit. There's the social community aspects, weddings and events. And the third one that we looked at the hardest was business, regional business things. So the competition is regional rather than local. And we spent an awful lot of time looking at prototypes. The bottom line is that it's not so affected by the oversupply of the transient facilities, which are aimed primarily at the airport traffic. I know that there's feasibility for that use. It's just not now. And the reason for that is primarily driven because that hotel segment and the conference center hotel segment still nationwide hasn't recovered from the hit in 2007. About every other component of the real estate industry has kind of recovered back to 2007 levels before the hit. But that hospitality component has not yet. So you've got an uphill fight to try to attract significant capital for a new project. The other thing to consider is that a lot of the existing facilities failed, and they were acquired at steep discounts, or they were refinanced at very, very low rates, and they're positioned to drive rates down in what will be a very, very competitive environment until that 2007 levels recovered. So we'd be very vulnerable to existing facilities, Vancouver, Lake Chelan, and others that you could name around us in some distance. Again, not impossible, but a very, very tough sell. And our concept of feasibility has to be aimed at the prospect of success of attracting that developer to bring in that capital. The hotel is down the road, but at some point, something to really be done and considered. Parking is a huge consideration for the hotel because it generates a lot of traffic. Okay? So it'll be a challenge, but it's been met in other places. We wanted to go in without saying that, hey, it's worth doing, and if you subsidize it, it would be great. This project and our acid test for feasibility would have to be supported by identified and provable market opportunities, and that office component is one. It's harder to be financed because there's a heavier pre-leasing requirement because perceived risk. But that's the argument in favor of a project that has a multiple mixed-use component, because you'd start with the apartments because that's in front of you today. While you're doing the pre-leasing to go with the office component, your back door is if the offices didn't hit that level that you needed for the financing and the apartment's still strong, keep going with the apartments. So either way, you come out whole. So the phasing might delay. In fact, the analysis says well, you got a 6-year project with the apartment component and a 4 to 5 year with the apartments. The other thing that we're pushing here is let's not chicken out. If this property has potential, because we will see activity downtown and you'll see activity in the waterfront, then this is the linchpin between the two. And if we went with the lowest density just to be the safest, then we'd be regretting it that we've wasted a prime site 5 to 10 years later. So we aimed a little high. That concept plan aimed very high. The alternatives that are recommended in the report at the end are less ambitious, but still have those important components of what could be a placemaking project with enough critical mass to have an impact outside its boundaries. You're right. The market analysis is the fun part. It's the proof of the pudding.
Pinky?
I thought this market analysis was fascinating. And I've always thought a convention center or hotel in downtown would be wonderful. However, this report did not fill me with a lot of warm fuzzies in regards to economic development in Bellingham. And I'm concerned about the cost. And one of the things in here under fiscal impact, if maybe you could clarify for me, it says the cost of 2014 due diligence is $550,000 in our budget, but the projected approximate spending is over $1 million by the end of the year. Can you explain to me what those different budget items are?
Let me think. Our budget for this year was $550,000, and that includes all of our G&A, organizational overhead, and everything else. So that left, I can't remember the exact amount, but $300 and some thousand for this work. The memorandum of agreement talks about all of the due diligence that you'd have to do. It always anticipated that there would be a schematic level of planning and design for a project shaped to meet the parameters identified. So there was originally we were saying that's going to be about 1% of the project, probably $1 million if you go all the way to bring a developer in and those negotiations complete. That's beyond the scope of this work that was funded. So I think what we're saying is to complete it, if we say it's worth doing and everybody agrees, that it would be another $400,000 or $500,000 to shape this into a prospectus next year and then hit the street presenting it. I think that's that number.
Okay, thank you.
Can I offer something? Or if you're referencing the agenda bill, I think it contemplates all the spending to date.
Oh, that I'm sorry. Thank you, Brian. That figure is, we keep track of all of the charges for all of the properties since the beginning of the PDA, and that's showing the cumulative cost of all costs that have been incurred for Army Street. And we use that to balance the recovery of that number at various stops along the way. Just like a property owner saying, but my building is worth $300,000. I've got to get that from this project or more. So do we. I mean, we have to recover the money in there. So we're always balancing the value added to the asset with the cost basis that we'd book against it. So I'm sorry, that number you're talking about, Brian's right, that is the Army Street City investment through the end of this year.
I've got a question real fast. Jim, you said something about a demand for high-end apartments.
Right.
I didn't catch that anywhere in the report. What's the high-end part?
Well, let's see. The research, it looks at a lot of projects in the market, the size of the unit, the quality of the construction, the amenities they provide, and the rates that they charge, and what do you get for that rent. And the average, I think, that they spell out here is about $1.60 a month per square foot. And the average in our prototype here that would be market friendly is about 700 square foot average apartment. The rent that we would push, we're kicking around as we speak, but they recommend, if I recall, $1.75 per foot. So we're going to press that. We're going to try to get it to $2. Our job is to raise the bar and try to make it successful and get a lot of people following that prototype. So that's the high end of the market, because the high end is up there, $1.60 to $2. Same with office.
What kind of rent does that translate to a month?
Well, that would make a 700 square foot average unit, rent in the $1,300 a month range. Yeah, compare that to Seattle, it's $4 a foot.
Yeah.
Parking
I
is
have been.
amazing. Yeah, that's up there.
My apartment is 500 and some square feet downtown, and it's $890. It just went up.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
So
Just
what's per
curious,
square
because
foot?
at what point, do people enter the buyer's market? It's just very
Yeah,
interesting.
condominiums, everybody says have disappeared just because of a lot of abuses in that segment, but I personally do not believe that they're gone. I think that the ownership scenario is going to restart here once developers and they weed out the ones that poison that well.
Anyone else have a question or comment for Jim? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Well, thank
see
you.
you again
See
in
you
2
on the
weeks.
22nd.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, or no, it's this way. Yeah. That's hard. Thanks.
Moving on, that's the end of our presentations this afternoon. So we've got passage of minutes from August 11th. And then just old and new business. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from August 11th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, minutes pass 7-0.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, you were? Okay, and
Abstaining.
6-0 with one abstention, Jack Weiss abstaining. Thank you, Jack. Okay, any old or new business? Terry Borneman.
Yeah, I've got a couple items. The first is I would like to move that we pull agenda bill item 2464 from third and final to consider a revision to the zoning table at tonight's meeting as requested by Bill Geyer and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Something I've talked with planning about and previous to bringing it to the council, and so I wanted to pull that from third and final so we could consider that change tonight before we do the third and final.
That's 20464.
Yes.
That's on page 5.
Yes.
Okay, and Jean is seconded. I'm going to assume then we need to vote to take that off. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. So we'll address that separately this evening.
Okay. And the next item I have, well, as all of us here know and others may know, that Councilwoman Lehman is going to be resigning her position at the end of the year. We're real sad to hear that news, because I'm going to miss you. But I would like to propose that I'd like to move to consider bringing forward a proposed framework to replace Kathy at our September 22nd meeting, and that work with Peter Raffato to draft an ordinance that lays out a process for the replacement and a timetable. What I'd like to see is that the council be able to do this before the end of the year, so that when we have our reorganizational meeting in January, we have a new person in place, so that it'd be really awkward to have a reorganizational meeting and select all of our committees and then say, oh, by the way, you can have what's left over. So it'd be, I've sat through 2 of these already.
I've sat through 5, and it's not pretty, and I'm glad you're doing
Yeah.
it. No, I'm glad you're doing
Yeah.
this, because we've always gone by the seat of our pants. I hate to say it,
Right.
but that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I've sat through 2 of city council and 2 mayors? I don't know.
3 mayors.
Whatever. But
2 mayors.
yeah, and so that's my motion. I'd like to propose that, be able to work with Peter Raffato to bring back a process for us to consider it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Michael?
Just to clarify, you said ordinance. Would it be an ordinance or a resolution to determine the process?
Resolution. Yes.
That sounds great.
Sorry, yes.
No, that
a
sounds great.
resolution.
Yes, Peter?
Yeah, excuse me, just to add to that, Marie and I have already been talking about the process, and Marie did some excellent research finding exactly
Right.
what was done in the past, so we'll work together in bringing forward a resolution.
Okay. I would just love your opinion, I guess, on do we, as a body, go through all that process and make an appointment before I vacate my seat?
So far, I haven't found anything in the charter that would prevent that. I think the appointment would have to be explicitly...
To start.
It would be
Yeah.
basically effective upon the effective date of your resignation, so that it's just clear that if you changed your mind.
And that's sweet. And also, so then I would want some legal counsel on whether I should participate in that or if I have a conflict.
I don't,
Yeah, I think looking at city council ones in the past, the one that most closely resembles this one was when Joy Keenan resigned, and she did recuse herself from that since she was stepping down from it, and the council, and so there was a 6-member council that did it. And although I don't know legally, but that was,
That was my initial feeling, which generally tends to be blowing in the right direction. But, I mean, on moral issues. But I also didn't want to fail to do my duty, if that was my duty. So
there's never been a case that I can remember where the council person, I mean, we had a death, we've had a couple of resignations, we've had 2 people die, and there's been others that have resigned, but in no case did the council member who was leaving ever be able to participate.
that's helpful. Thanks, Gene. Jack, did you want to add something?
Well, I just, technically, have you formally resigned as far as giving a written statement? Because I've never seen anything. I've seen your press release. I've seen, you've called me, but do you need to have something in writing and give it to the council? Because again, I mean, the whole idea of whether or not you change your mind, if you have it in writing, have you given a commitment versus just saying something verbally?
Well, how about I ask Peter about some of these ins and outs before our next meeting, but I believe I have verbally and in public noticed the fact that I am resigning effective December 31st, so my assumption is that that is effective December 31st. But yeah, I'll talk to you, Peter, about that. And so we have a motion and a second for Terry to work with Peter to bring forward a process and a framework for my replacement on City Council. Any other discussion? Roxanne?
Maybe we could just include in the resolution a no just kidding clause.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And I am going to abstain from that vote this time, so 6-0 with 1 abstention. Any other old or new business? Roxanne?
Well, I'm going to propose something that I've wanted to do ever since I was a young girl, and before October 13th, I hope the council and the committee of the whole would consider replacing Columbus Day with Coast Salish Day.
Okay. Great, thank you.
No, it's a big thought. I know it's a big thought and a big deal, and it's a big canoe, and I just hope people might join in the canoe and help me pull it.
I bet if you write a little summary of what the canoe needs, it would be helpful. Okay. Any other old or new business? See none. Okay, we do not have any executive session items this afternoon, so our business is concluded and we'll reconvene this evening at 7 o'clock. Thank you.